Hey guys, tonight we're slipping off our shoes, yes, even those cozy socks, and stepping barefoot into something much older and much stranger than your usual bedtime fare. The floor is cool beneath you, polished stone or worn down wood, you can't quite tell, but it smells faintly of sandalwood and rice powder, and you can hear the distant flutter of silk. You're not in your room anymore. You're in a place where beauty is measured in inches. 3, to be exact. You probably won't survive the by the way. Not if you were born a girl in 10th century China, and not if your mother decided you were destined for more than field work or poverty. Because this story, it starts at the feet, but it seeps upward into your bones, your future, your sense of worth. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in a narrow courtyard in Fujian. It's early morning. The sun hasn't cleared the tiled rooftops yet, and the mist lingers like breath on porcelain. You hear the creak of wooden sandals as an old woman shuffles by. Her gait is slow, a side-to-side wobble, almost like she's balancing on stilts. She's not. She's wearing a pair of Lotus shoes. Those impossibly tiny, brightly embroidered things that look more like doll accessories than footwear. Her feet? You can't see them, but you can imagine. You've heard the whispers. Curled toes, broken arches, bones reshaped like calligraphy, elegant, deliberate, and agonizing. And the strangest thing? She smiles at you. There's pride in her eyes. Not bitterness, not regret. Welcome to the world of foot binding, a world where pain is beauty, and beauty is destiny. Where a woman's worth might be measured in tea ceremonies and obedient silences, but her value, that lies in her step, or her stagger. You walk through narrow alleys where girls giggle behind their sleeves. Their shoes peek out from under long skirts, pointed like ships' prows, stitched with phoenixes and peonies. You think, why would anyone do this? And then you remember, beauty is never a solo decision. It's a performance, a contract with the culture you're born into. Historians still argue whether foot binding was originally a fetish, a fashion, or a form of elite control. Some say it began in the Tang dynasty, inspired by an imperial dancer named Yao Niang, who twirled on her toes inside a golden lotus-shaped stage. Others trace it later to the Song dynasty, when women's roles were shrinking as fast as their shoes. But one thing's for sure, once it began, it didn't stop. Not for a millennium. You sit on a wooden bench beside a pair of embroidered shoes, no longer than an iPhone. They belong to a girl named Shu. She's 11. Her mother is heating water in a copper basin nearby. She calls it the softening. Shu's feet have already been bound for a year. She winces as the cloth is removed. Her pinky toe is black at the tip. Infection. Maybe, but that's normal. In fact, if a toe falls off, that just makes the foot easier to shape. Less bulk, a better arch, more symmetry. You're not nauseous, not quite, just breathless, like watching someone hold their hand over a candle for too long. In this world, symmetry is sacred. Tiny feet aren't just attractive, they're moral. They show discipline, control, obedience. Shu's mother explains this with pride, even as she tightens the next wrap of cloth. The girl doesn't cry anymore. That stage is over. Now it's just a quiet endurance. You wonder what else she endures in silence. The courtyard smells like boiled herbs and chrysanthemum tea. Overhead, paper lanterns shift gently in the breeze, casting rippling shadows. Someone hums a lullaby. It's too gentle for this place, and yet, somehow, it fits. You begin to understand that this isn't just about fashion, it's about belonging. The shoes are tokens. The gate becomes a signal. A girl with unbound feet. She might as well be barefoot in the mud. She might as well be poor, or worse, loose. You pass another house, where red wedding papers flutter from the doorframe. A bride sits inside, motionless, her face covered by a silk veil, but her feet are visible, perched on a stool, bound, perfect, proof of her family's honor. A dowry in fabric and pain. You feel a chill as you move on, not just from the air, but from a quiet realization. This custom wasn't imposed by distant emperors with harsh laws. It was mothers, aunties, grandmothers, 1,000 soft hands, passing on the art like a family recipe. The deeper tragedy? They believed it was love. You reach a shaded pavilion where a pair of painted scrolls hang. One shows a woman with long sleeves and tiny steps, walking among lotus flowers. The other shows a crane, its feet tucked, hidden, elegant. You're told they're the same thing. You want to protest. Say, this is cruelty, not art, but art is what survives. The bones don't. And somewhere deep in your heels, your arches start to ache. A strange sympathy. Perhaps. Or maybe just your mind playing tricks as it slides into older footsteps. But for tonight, that's what you do. You walk softly. You wear the shoes. You follow the echo. Because this story is still unfolding, and you're not ready to look away just yet. You catch up with Shu again the next morning. The air smells like congee and burnt sugar. Some auntie must be caramelizing ginger for cough syrup in a pan that's older than you are. Shu is sitting on a small wooden stool, her feet tucked beneath her robes. She doesn't notice you at first. Her eyes are fixed on her embroidery hoop, the needle rising and falling like a breath. Then, without looking up, she says, "I dreamed I ran, without falling." You sit beside her in the dust. She shows you the pair of shoes she finished last night. Pale blue silk, embroidered with tiny cranes. The soles are stitched so tightly that they make a soft crunch when she presses them. New shoes are meant to creak, like bamboo in the wind. It's considered elegant. Shu's feet are no longer her own. They're projects now, sculptures in progress. And the shoes? They're both celebration and cage. The process began when she was 6. Young, but not unusually so. Her mother soaked her feet in a decoction of herbs, wormwood, chrysanthemum, ginger, to improve circulation. Then the real work began. Toes were curled under the sole, the arch was pressed upward, the heel pulled back, long strips of cloth, dipped in a light rice glue, were wound from the ball of the foot to the ankle, tight, then tighter. The goal was an arch so high and toes so tucked that the foot formed a perfect crescent, the golden lotus shape. You wince just imagining it. But Shu shrugs. My aunt says it's like growing new bones. You resist the urge to say, no, it's like breaking them, because they were broken, deliberately, slowly, over years. The bones of the foot, 26 in all, weren't snapped in a single moment, but softened, bent, compressed, bit by bit, step by step, and every day the girl had to walk, not in comfort, in pain. It was crucial to keep walking. If she didn't, the foot might heal in the wrong shape. If it healed too soon, too stiff, the arch wouldn't curve properly. So even as the bandages cut into her skin and toenails blackened from lack of blood, Shu was made to walk figure eights around the courtyard. Blood seeped through her socks some days. On others, it pooled in her shoes. Her mother lined them with dried mint leaves to mask the smell. You're not sure if that was tenderness or just good manners. Historians still argue whether this custom began as a dancer's trick to seduce an emperor or as a deeper attempt to domesticate women, literally, to keep them from walking too far from home. One theory claims foot binding spread when poetry about lotus steps became fashionable among scholars in the Song dynasty. Another says it emerged independently across classes, fueled by aesthetics and reinforced by peer pressure, so ancient it wore silk. There's a saying carved into a lacquer box you pass in the market. A woman with bound feet need not speak. That's the logic. Small steps, soft voice, still hands. But in the back alleys of your dream state stroll, you notice something else. The women aren't just suffering, they're adapting. They've built entire economies around it. Shoemaking, embroidery, bandage weaving, herbal soaks sold in tiny blue glazed bottles. Shu's grandmother used to trade with a vendor named Aunt Fay, who specialized in almond oil and salt packs to reduce infection. 1 drop each night, she told girls, and your heel will not rot before your wedding. You laugh quietly, not because it's funny, but because the casual tone makes it worse, like applying mascara before a hanging. There's an odd kind of pride to it all, not just endurance, but mastery. Like, yes, I bound my feet and did it well. You hear a group of women gossiping over their looms. They're comparing foot lengths the way some people compare high scores. Mine are 2 3/4, Maista, one boasts. Only 3 toes left. Another nods sagely. That's lucky. Odd numbers attract wealth. The idea of luck feels strange here, as if fortune lives inside a crushed pinky toe. You trail behind them until you reach a temple courtyard. Incense coils hang from the ceiling like golden snakes. The floor is swept clean. In the center, a statue of Guan Yin, the goddess of compassion, smiles serenely down. At her feet, someone has left a tiny pair of lotus shoes, wrapped in red silk. A prayer, maybe, or a thank you, or an apology. You wonder what the goddess thinks of it all. Outside, the world keeps turning. Men sell sugar hawthorns on sticks. Boys chase chickens. But every few feet, you see a woman hobbling gracefully by, as though walking on porcelain teacups. The walk itself becomes a performance. 1 foot set slightly behind the other, knees bent, hips swaying. Some poets called it the swaying willow walk, elegant, restrained, feminine. But you see the tension in every movement. It's like watching someone dance with invisible chains. There's a myth you overhear at a roadside stall. If a girl reaches marriage age without binding her feet, her parents will never find her a good match, even if she's clever, even if she's beautiful, because unbound feet mean she's wild, and wild daughters are like untamed horses. They run. They embarrass. You lean against a stone wall and stare at your own feet for a while. Would you have chosen differently if you were Shu? And more unsettling, would you have complied if you were her mother? That's the real weight of this history. Not just what happened, but who allowed it, who passed it down, who called it tradition, who whispered it was love. Because foot binding didn't survive through tyranny, it survived through tenderness. You don't go far this time, just beyond the walls of the market square, where a narrow alley turns soft with moss and shadow. A woman sits cross-legged on a stone ledge, shelling peanuts with a flick of her thumb. She's old enough to remember when shoes weren't bought in shops, but measured in family honor. She looks up and gestures you closer. You want to know how it started? She says. Her accent's thick with the southern hills, but her gaze is sharp. It wasn't always like this. We weren't born hobbling. You sit beside her. She offers you a peanut. You take it, and she begins. Some say it began in the palace, she murmurs, with dancers. One girl danced on her toes like a golden bird, and the emperor, he liked it so much, he told all his women to learn it. They couldn't, of course, so they bound their feet instead. She shrugs. Men misunderstand beauty all the time. That's one version, the romantic one. You trace her words through time like stepping stones, watching stories unfold like painted scrolls. Another version, the Song Dynasty, around the 10th century, a time when elite families competed to show off refinement through poetry, calligraphy, and the bodies of their women. Big feet meant field work, servitude. Small feet meant wealth. It meant your daughter could stay indoors, read poems, play the guzheng, and never lift a bucket. Historians still argue whether the practice began with a single concubine or evolved from older customs of footwear and eroticism. Some suggest it was a logical next step from ornate shoes and platform sandals, which had long carried symbolic weight in Chinese culture. But this wasn't just about shoes. It was about reshaping the body to mirror a dream, a lotus petal, a crescent moon, 1,000 metaphors, all anchored to the same reality, pain disguised as delicacy. You stroll now through a recreated scholar's home, the kind with lacquered beams and moon-shaped windows. A scroll hangs on the wall, a poem from the Yuan dynasty. Her steps are like drifting clouds. Her fragrance stirs the dustless hall. Her feet, curled as spring's first bloom, tread softly on a world too loud. Sounds lovely, until you remember the toes it took to write it. You pause in front of a tapestry where a man kneels before his bride, slipping a tiny shoe onto her foot. It's Cinderella, East Asian edition, but instead of magic, it's math. 3 inches. No more. This wasn't a casual whim. Entire social structures were built around it. Parents began binding their daughters' feet, not because they were cruel, but because they were terrified. A girl with unbound feet had fewer prospects. She might marry down, or worse, not at all. That kind of fate, especially in a patriarchal lineage, wasn't just sad. It was dangerous, a burden, a shame. So the binding began early, often between ages 5 and 8, when bones were soft but memories still formed. Some girls begged for it, not because they wanted the pain, but because they wanted approval. They wanted to be wanted. The phrase echoes in your head, wanted to be wanted. That alone could bind anyone. A gust of wind rustles your sleeve. You're suddenly in a back room of a textile shop, where a dusty ledger records customer orders. Blue silk, size 3, bride, May wedding. Embroidered pair for 7th birthday, begins binding this spring. The notes are ordinary, practical, like ordering ribbon or rice. You almost forget what they're for. Then you see a child's shoe beside the register. Tiny, pointed. The toe is turned upward, like it's smiling. You hold it in your palm. It weighs almost nothing, but it feels heavy. Back in the courtyard, the woman is still speaking. Her voice is softer now. I asked my mother once why she bound my feet. She said, so you could rise in life. I believed her. Her feet are wrapped in old cloth now. She doesn't wear the shoes anymore, Just soft socks, hand darned, but the shape remains, arched, crumpled, as if even freedom didn't dare undo the damage. You ask her, would you have done the same to your daughter? She looks at you, long and hard. I didn't have one, she says. Then she looks away. The silence that follows is thick, like steamed buns left too long in the basket. You stay there, not saying anything. Watch in the shadows stretch across the paving stones. What do you even say? That you understand? That you wouldn't have done it? Easy to say. When you live in a time where feet are free and fashion is pain, you can return to the store. But this wasn't just fashion. It was identity. An unbound girl wasn't considered rough or poor. She was considered wrong, like a poem without rhythm, a painting with no ink, a dish with too much salt. In the court records of the late Ming Dynasty, one scholar famously wrote, "To marry a girl with large feet is to invite ridicule from one's ancestors, and ridicule was worse than hunger. You take one last peanut, press it between your teeth, the crunch echoes." You don't notice until later that the woman never ate a single one herself. She just sat there, fingers curled into her sleeves, feet tucked beneath her memory. You'll find yourself walking again, though walking feels like too modern a word. This part of your journey comes with a different cadence, more of a shuffle pause wince rhythm, mimicking the very steps you're learning about. Ahead of you, a young girl, no more than 6, is being led across a courtyard, one hand gripping her mother's sleeve, the other clutching a rolled cloth. The cloth isn't for comfort, it's for binding. Today is her first day. The water is already steaming in the basin. You catch the scent of wormwood and ginger again, stronger now, almost overwhelming. It's meant to soothe the nerves, to soften the tendons, to make the flesh pliable, but you know better. The water doesn't soothe, it prepares. A pair of scissors lies on a low stool. They're not for cutting flesh, nothing so dramatic, but for trimming nails, sharp edges, any part of the foot that might resist the transformation. The girl is seated. Her feet are bare, pale against the wood. Her mother gently places one in her lap and begins. First comes massage, pressing the arch, rubbing the toes. You think for a moment this might be relaxing, until the cloth comes out. Long strips, already warmed, already stiffening from starch. They're wrapped tight, tighter, tightest. Each pass pulls the toes inward, the arch upward, the heel slightly back. It's not just wrapping, it's engineering. The girl exhales hard, but doesn't cry. Not yet. You wonder how many mothers have done this before. How many believed that to love their daughter meant to hurt her before the world could. That pain delivered by family is less cruel than pain delivered by society. Historians still argue whether the earliest bindings were voluntary, initiated by ambitious families who wanted to align themselves with elite tastes, or enforced from above, a top-down model of refinement. Some even suggest women had more agency in the custom than we like to believe. But how much choice does a 6-year-old really have? You feel a sudden weight in your hands, a pair of old Lotus shoes, embroidered with plum blossoms. The soles are reinforced with bits of bamboo. You press on the toe, it barely gives. There's no room in there for movement, or doubt. The girl begins to cry now. It's not a scream. It's more of a whimper, the kind that bubbles up when the body realizes this is not pretend. This is not a game. Her mother keeps working, gently, patiently, almost lovingly. And that's the most disturbing part. This isn't a punishment. It's a ceremony. You step away. You can't help it. You duck behind a hanging curtain and take a deep breath. The air there is cooler, laced with sandalwood and ink, a scholar's study, shelves of bamboo scrolls and paper fans, and, tucked in the corner, a record, the 3 obediences and 4 virtues, a Confucian moral code for women. Obey your father before marriage, your husband during marriage, your son after widowhood. Be modest, be chaste, be diligent, be silent. You think of the girl again. You imagine what her diary might say, if she had one. Today, I became beautiful. My toes feel like fish bones in my slippers. I must remember not to cry in front of grandmother. She says, girls who cry are ugly. A rooster crows somewhere in the background. Another girl, slightly older, hobbles past the window with practiced grace. She's got a book tied to her waist and a brush tucked in her sleeve. Her walk is stilted, but proud. Not all bound-foot women were idle ornaments. Many were literate, clever. They composed poems, managed estates, taught their sons. Their feet were broken, but their minds were sharp. In fact, during the Qing dynasty, educated women with bound feet were celebrated as paragons of refinement, especially if they could quote poetry while hiding their limp. You follow her into a garden where women sit beneath a magnolia tree. They're sewing, gossiping. One says, "Did you hear? Leon's daughter didn't bind in time. No one will marry her now." Another replies, "She'll end up selling salt cakes in the village square." It's not cruel, just casual, like saying someone missed the train. You're offered tea, you take it, it's bitter, mung bean, perhaps, meant to cool the body, but your stomach turns a little. A younger girl is practicing her walk nearby. She balances a teacup on her head. Her feet barely move. 1, 2, pause. 1, 2, pause. The rhythm is mesmerizing. You almost admire it. Almost. Then she stumbles. The teacup crashes. Everyone gasps, not at the sound, but at the failure. One woman rushes to help. Another shakes her head. She'll never be graceful now. You look down. The girl's foot has slipped from her shoe. Her bandages are stained. A small blister weeps at the heel. She doesn't cry either. She just bows her head. Pain. You're beginning to realize, becomes invisible over time. Not because it disappears, but because it's expected, like humidity or gravity. The girl resets her shoe, tries again. You ask someone nearby how long it takes for the foot to reach ideal size. 3 inches, she says. With good wrapping and strong discipline, 5 years. You blink. 5 years of daily rebinding, of walking on purposefully disfigured bones, of hiding infection, odor, bleeding, and yet, in that same garden, you hear someone laugh, a bright, clean sound, like chimes. Because even here, even in this deeply painful tradition, life continues. Girls still joke, they still dream, they still learn to enjoy small things, a new silk, a compliment, the rare comfort of a fire-warmed stone under their feet. It doesn't make it okay, but it does make it real. You sip your tea again. It's not as bitter this time. Or maybe you're just adjusting. By now, your feet ache just watching others walk. Not a sharp pain, but something creeping. A dull pressure that wraps itself around the middle of your arch and squeezes with every imagined step. You wiggle your toes in your blanket, or are they still there? You're not sure anymore. The morning sun filters through a lattice screen as you follow Shu again. She's 12 now. Her feet have finished forming, though they'll still be bound every night to maintain the shape. The bones are set. The damage is permanent. She no longer flinches when she walks. Her steps are tiny and precise, like calligraphy brush strokes on wet rice paper. Each footfall whispers across the courtyard. One of the aunties murmurs, "She walks like silk falling." You try not to think of the years it took to learn that. She's headed for a beauty review, a polite way to say she's being inspected, not by doctors, by matchmakers. It's marriage season. You trail behind, invisible as a dream. The house she enters belongs to the Liu family, well-off merchants who've made a fortune selling medicinal roots and incense sticks. The family's son is 17. His mother sits on a raised platform, flanked by two aunts with eyes sharp enough to slice ginger. Shu bows low. The hems of her robe kiss the floor, but their eyes are not on her face. They want to see her feet. The request is wordless, a lift of the chin, a flick of the wrist. Shu nods and sits delicately, unfastening the silk ties of her shoes. Her hands don't tremble. You, on the other hand, feel your jaw tighten. She slides one foot out. It's still wrapped in gauze-thin cloth, pink, embroidered, stained faintly near the heel. One of the aunts leans forward. She untucks the bandage with practiced fingers, revealing something unnatural. The arch is impossibly high. The toes curve beneath the sole, nearly fused in posture, if not in bone. The heel looks strong, but the front is a crescent, almost a hoof. No one gasps. No one blinks. This is exactly what they hope to see. The other aunt nods approvingly. 3 inches, maybe a hair more. The matriarch sips her tea, then sets the cup down. She can marry in spring, just like that. Not a word about her laugh, her embroidery, her favorite songs, her opinions on plum blossom season. Just the feet, the shape, the proof. You feel a chill rise from the floor tiles. Outside, a woman sells candies wrapped in rice paper. Children shout. The world continues. But in this room, Shu just became a worthy bride. Historians still argue whether bound feet improved marriage prospects across all classes or mostly among the gentry. Some studies suggest it was a tool to solidify clan alliances. Others believe it filtered downward over centuries until even peasant families felt pressure to conform, just in case a merchant passed through with a son to spare. You follow Shu home. Her mother is waiting with tea and a small cake. Almond and sesame, her favorite. She said yes? The mother asks. Shu nods. They don't hug. They just sip their tea in silence. You don't say it aloud, but it buzzes in your ears. She just sold her future for a match based on deformity, but no one here would see it that way. In fact, foot binding was often described in loving language. Not damage, but discipline. Not mutilation, but moral cultivation. Manuals from the late Ming Dynasty describe the process with euphemisms like nurturing elegance or refining the flesh. One 17th century beauty manual advises, bind at dawn, rebind at dusk, let the girl walk in garden paths, not for distance, but for the shaping of her soul. You pass a calligrapher's shop and see that line etched on the wall. People nod as they read it, because by now, the custom has entered the bloodstream of the culture. It's not questioned. It's not resisted. It simply is. You cross a stone bridge over a koi pond and meet another girl, May. She's 14, unmarried, and her feet are only partially bound, not malformed enough for true lotus shape, not large enough for labor. She's stuck between worlds. Her mother gave up mid-process. Too much infection. Too many nights spent crying into a sleeve. Her father is angry, not because she's in pain, but because now they'll have trouble finding a match. No one wants a girl with half-formed feet, he says. May hides behind the bamboo wall and listens. You sit beside her. She picks at the fraying edge of her bandage. They told me it would be worth it, she says. But now I can't even carry water without stumbling. You try to comfort her. But what can you say? There's no unbinding the past, only adjusting how you carry it. The candlelight flickers against her profile. She looks older than 14, older than Shu, older than most women you've met in this town. Pain accelerates time. Apparently. Back at the Liu home, preparations are underway for the wedding. Silk bolts arrive by cart, red candles, incense, a gift list written in gold ink. Shu will marry into wealth. She'll have servants. Her shoes will be lacquered in real pearl dust, but none of that can undo the years she spent training her body to become smaller. You lie down beneath the magnolia tree and stare upward through the leaves. For a moment, you imagine a different world, one where Shu learned to run, not shrink, where May's father praised her strong stride, where tiny shoes were toys, not tools, but it's just a dream. You turn over and catch one last glimpse of Shu's foot as she steps into her wedding robe, 3 inches, the size of survival. The wedding is over now. You didn't stay for the whole thing, just long enough to see Shu lowered into the red sedan chair, her veil heavy with gold-threaded butterflies, her bound feet tucked neatly beneath silken layers. She looked calm, not radiant, not afraid, just contained, like everything she might have said had already been tied down, years ago, with the first knot of the first bandage. And now, it's your turn. You're not marrying, of course, but you're being handed the cloth. You're inside a different home now, a small one, far from the courtyards and scholars' halls. The air smells faintly of vinegar and burnt scallions. A dog sleeps in the doorway. The woman in front of you has a firm face and flower on her sleeves. She's your mother, or rather, she's someone's mother. And in this dreamlike haze, you've become that someone. She lifts your foot gently, examines it like a seamstress inspecting a hem. Then she dips it into the herbal basin, warm water, a little too hot. The smell of angelica root fills your nose. This time, we bind tighter, she says. And you nod. You don't argue, not because you agree, but because this woman's hands carry generations of certainty. Her own feet, bound decades ago, still remember the tightness even as she pretends they don't hurt anymore. Historians still argue how widespread the practice truly became. Some say up to 50% of Han Chinese women had bound feet by the 19th century. Others suggest it varied drastically by region, common in the north, rare in the far south, nearly absent among ethnic minorities and lower-class rural women who needed mobility for farming. But in this village, where walls are patched with straw and gossip travels faster than pigeons, bound feet are still the standard. So, when your mother wraps the cloth around your toes, you clench your teeth. You don't cry. You've learned from the girls before you. You walk the perimeter of the house 4 times, like she tells you. It's important to walk immediately after binding, while the cloth is still fresh and wet, while the body is still impressionable. You take steps like you're walking on knives, and in a way, you are. She watches you from the doorway. You can't tell whether her expression is proud or hollow. Later that night, she unbinds your feet to check for damage. A toenail has turned purple. The second toe is beginning to curl more tightly than the others. She nods. It's working, she says. You don't respond. You want to ask, is this what you wanted for me? Did you pray for a daughter just so you could do this to her? But the words don't rise. You've learned by now that certain questions only live in your throat. So, instead, you stare at the ceiling, and silently, your body begins to memorize the shape of surrender. Days pass. The rhythm becomes familiar. Unbind. Soak. Rebind. Walk. Sit. Walk again. Each movement takes on the slow, dreamy quality of a routine that shouldn't exist, but does. You start recognizing the other girls by their limps. May, whose bindings were abandoned. Hua, whose left foot turned out better than her right. Lin, who hasn't left her house in weeks because of a stubborn ulcer near her heel. And still, no one calls it torture. They call it preparation. Your husband won't want a girl who thunders like a buffalo. Someone jokes. You laugh, because you're supposed to. The reality is, this is love. Or at least, what love looks like here. Protection through pain. Instruction through injury. Guidance through silence. Your mother tells you a story as she tightens the cloth. One night. A tale from her own youth. There was a girl, she says, who begged her mother not to bind her feet. She swore she'd marry anyone, rich or poor, if only she could keep them free. Her mother agreed. The girl grew up, clever and strong. She worked the fields. She laughed often. She pauses. And? She died alone, your mother says. A beat. Then, no one wanted her. She frightened them. You're not sure if it's a warning or a memory. You start noticing the smell of foot binding everywhere, a mixture of herbs, sweat, old bandages, faint traces of pus and perfume. It's a scent you can't scrub from the walls. In wealthier homes, they mask it with lavender powder or jasmine oil. But here, it lingers honestly. Your shoes are stuffed with dried orange peel. Supposedly, it keeps away infection. You wonder if it works. You meet a woman who offers a stranger trick. Sheep's brain mashed into a poultice, applied overnight. Softens the bones, she whispers. Makes reshaping easier. You almost try it. Almost. Instead, you take longer walks, just down the alley and back, one step at a time. You pass by the old apothecary, where bottles of arnica root and snake gall line the walls. You stop and stare at a scroll hanging behind the counter. Heaven weeps for the unbound foot. It's a joke. Apparently, the man behind the counter laughs when he sees you reading it. Meant to keep customers entertained, he says. Binding is serious business, but not so serious we can't laugh about it. You smile politely, but you wonder, is it better to laugh at the pain or to feel it fully? That night, your bandages are tighter than usual. You've been told that pain is progress, and progress is honor. But still, your ankle throbs in time with your heartbeat. It takes you an hour to fall asleep. When you do, you dream of running barefoot through a pine forest. The air is cold. The ground is soft with needles. You leap. You land. You do not fall. And when you wake, your feet are numb. You think that might be worse than pain. You've learned to wake early, not because you want to, but because your feet demand it. In those first minutes after sleep, the numbness fades, and the pain returns, like an old friend who shows up uninvited and overstays. You swing your legs over the side of the sleeping mat and brace yourself. One foot down, then the other. You wince, not just from the ache, but from the stiffness, the unnatural angle. Your toes have begun to overlap. nesting awkwardly beneath the ball of your foot. It's no longer just discomfort, it's your default. You shuffle to the window. Outside, the matchmaker is already at work. Her name is Madame Shen, and she's famous in 5 villages. Not for her kindness, no one's that naive, but for her efficiency. She matches girls the way a tea seller matches leaves, by type, fragrance, and market value. Today she's meeting with 3 mothers. You're not included, not yet, but you hover near the doorway, pretending to adjust a curtain, listening. She's 16, one mother says. Her lotus is barely under 4 inches, but the shape is beautiful. She's quiet, another offers, never interrupts. Mine reads poetry and plays the zither. The third says, her lotus is perfect. Even the servant says so. You wonder who the servant is, and whether she has feet of her own. Madame Shen nods through it all, sipping tea with the poise of someone who's heard every version of the same story 100 times. Then she makes her notes. And just like that, futures are arranged. Not based on hearts or dreams, but measurements. One of those measurements? Foot length. The ideal remains 3 inches. The golden lotus. A silver lotus is 4 inches. Acceptable. A steel lotus? 5 inches. A disaster. Historians still argue whether the precise size standards varied across dynasties and regions, but the terminology endured. It turned the female body into currency. A girl with 3-inch feet could marry a scholar. 4 inches? A merchant? 5? You might end up with a butcher, if you're lucky. You sit beside your mother that afternoon while she polishes your best pair of shoes. They're stiff with embroidery, red thread, tiny plum blossoms. Shoes this small are more artwork than footwear. They'll ask to see them, she says, not looking up. Make sure your stockings are clean, and keep your ankles together when you walk. You nod, though you already know. This part of girlhood is like auditioning for a role you didn't ask for. You are not evaluated on your kindness, cleverness, or courage. You are evaluated on your ability to endure. One girl in the next village dared to present herself with 5-inch feet. She was laughed out of the matchmaker's parlor. The rumors said she tripped as she walked, dropped a teacup, blushed when someone asked her to dance. You never saw her again. Maybe she married a farmer. Maybe she became a nun. Maybe she just stopped showing her feet. You pass a market stall that sells wedding trousseaux, combs, hand mirrors, sachets stuffed with dried magnolia petals. You watch 2 women argue over a comb carved from ox horn, not because of its quality, but because the design shows a woman with bound feet standing on a lotus leaf. See, one says, even the gods prefer refinement. The other nods. Ungraceful women sink. You think of that word, refinement. It comes up a lot, in songs, scrolls, and everyday chatter. But what does it really mean? To refine something is to remove the roughness, the wildness, the strength. You begin to suspect that this was never about feet at all. It was about control, not just of women's movement, but of their presence, the way they occupy space, their speed, their range, their will. Small steps mean smaller lives. There's a boy across the street who doesn't seem to notice your feet at all. He throws pebbles into a pond and sings to himself. You've never spoken to him, but you imagine what it would be like to walk beside him, freely, to race, to kick up dust, but then he's called away, and you remember, fantasy is only safe when it's silent. That evening, you're summoned to meet Madame Shen. Your palms sweat, though your shoes gleam. Your mother straightens your collar. Your gait is perfect now, slow, swaying, almost hovering. Pain has trained you well. You kneel before the matchmaker. She lifts your robe, hem slightly, nods, measures. Then she says, "Almost perfect, if only a quarter inch shorter." You feel your stomach drop. Your mother says nothing, but her fingers twitch beside her teacup. Madame Shen continues, "Still, the shape is good. We'll list her for merchant families. No scholars, unless they're second sons." You're dismissed. That's it. A life narrowed down to fractions. You walk home slower than usual. Your mother doesn't speak the entire way. Not until you're inside, behind closed doors, with the lamps lit. Then she says, "Tomorrow, we tighten." You nod, but that night, you lie awake staring at the rafters, and for the first time, you feel something not quite pain and not quite anger. It's resistance, quiet, unformed, but real. You think of the girl who walked out with her 5-inch feet, who stumbled and laughed anyway. You wonder if she still laughs. You're sitting on a worn mat now, next to an open window where a faint breeze lifts the edges of a hanging scroll. Outside, it's quiet. Too quiet. Even the cicadas seem hesitant to chirp in this kind of stillness. In your lap, a pair of shoes. Lotus shoes. You're holding them like they're sacred. And in a way, they are. They're only 3 inches long. Just wide enough for curled toes. Just high enough to mimic an arch. The heel is hard, reinforced with pressed leather. The sole is stitched from layers of cotton soaked in boiled rice paste. But it's the embroidery that catches you. Tiny stitches of silk thread, forming a garden in bloom. Peonies, cranes, a phoenix if you tilt your head. You turn one over gently. A name is stitched inside in careful brush strokes. Lianhua, lotus flower. You trace the name with your thumb. These shoes weren't mass-produced. They weren't picked off a shelf in a dusty store. They were handcrafted, often by the girl herself, or her mother, or her grandmother. The act of making them was intimate, an initiation, a declaration. Your feet were bound, but your shoes could still be beautiful. You're told every girl had at least 2 pairs, one for daily wear, one for show. Wealthier girls had dozens, lined in lacquered cabinets, each with different embroidery for seasons and festivals. Some were even padded with crushed pearls or painted with ink poems on the inside sole. The poems wouldn't be seen, but the girl would know they were there. That's the odd duality of it. Public agony, private artistry. You're invited to try one on. It takes effort. Your foot is already bound, already shaped, but the shoe is even smaller than you expected. You have to fold your toes tighter, press your heel in at an angle. For a moment, you wonder if it's the wrong size. Then you realize it's meant to hurt. The pain is the point, because comfort is for laborers, for servants. For women who carry water jugs and bend at the waist and walk to market. But these shoes say, "I do not walk far." These shoes say, "I belong indoors." These shoes say, "I am refined, therefore I suffer, quietly." Historians still argue whether women truly saw their shoes as status symbols or whether they were trapped by social coercion. Diaries from the Qing period describe girls admiring each other's shoes like modern teenagers admire sneakers or designer bags. And it makes you pause. Maybe the tragedy isn't that they suffered. Maybe the tragedy is that they learned to compete in their suffering. You look around the room. You're not alone. There are other girls here. Their feet tucked beneath them. Some giggling. Some silently sewing. A few are practicing walking with new shoes. Careful. Stuttering steps. You watch a girl pause mid-stride to adjust the heel. She doesn't flinch. Her shoes are pale lavender with golden koi swimming across the arch. Masterful stitching. You admire them, and in some shameful part of your brain, you think, I wish mine looked like that. Even now, even knowing what you know, you still feel that pull, the allure of pretty things that hurt. One girl, younger than the others, is threading a needle. Her feet are still in their beginning stage, wrapped clumsily, toes not yet fully folded. She frowns as she works, tongue poking out in concentration. She's sewing a small dragon into the toe of her shoe. Why a dragon? Someone asks. She grins. So I can fly. The older girls laugh, not cruelly, fondly, as if they all once believed something similar. Maybe they did. You hold your own shoe tighter. There's something strange about the contradiction in front of you. These girls are not broken, not bitter. They're living. They gossip about boys. They compare silk colors. They tease each other about secret crushes and dumpling recipes. This isn't a dungeon. It's a dressing room. And that, somehow, makes it worse, because the system didn't need guards or chains. It was enforced by embroidery hoops and compliments. You notice a trunk in the corner, old lacquer peeling. You open it slowly. Inside, more shoes, dozens, maybe hundreds. Some pristine, some worn to threadbare. One pair is covered in dirt, clearly once beloved. Another is painted with lotus flowers so vivid they seem wet. A letter is tucked into one shoe. You unfold it. The paper crackles. To my daughter, when you are old enough to understand, these shoes made me suffer, but they also made me desired. I give them to you not because I want you to hurt, but because I want you to belong. Forgive me. Pacharare. You read it twice, then you place it back carefully, as if disturbing it might stir the ghost of that woman's shame. You leave the trunk closed. You return to your place by the window, your own shoes still in your hands. They are exquisite. They are terrible. And they are yours. That night, you dream of feet, piles of them, clean, curled, crimson at the tips, and shoes floating above like lanterns, softly glowing, untethered from the pain below. They drift into the sky. You do not follow. You wake to the sound of drums, low and rhythmic, not celebratory, but solemn, almost funereal. You shuffle toward the courtyard, feet still bound, and join a quiet crowd forming around a red-painted wooden platform. A man stands at the front in official robes, unrolling a scroll. An imperial decree. You blink, still half asleep. Did you time travel again? Yes, but also no. The banners overhead tell you it's the Qing dynasty now. A Manchu emperor sits on the throne, and unlike the Han majority, the Manchus don't bind their women's feet. In fact, they despise the practice. So here it is, the law. No more foot binding, says the imperial court. The practice is now forbidden. Anyone caught binding a girl's feet will face punishment. You look around. The crowd is silent, but no one looks surprised. You spot Madame Shen in the back row, holding a folded parasol and not blinking once. You spot your own mother, her hands gripping your sleeve tighter than usual. Her mouth is a thin, unreadable line. The decree is clear, but the people, they are not convinced. As soon as the officials leave, riding off in horses that look far too proud of themselves, the murmuring begins. It's not our custom, one woman whispers. What do the Manchus know about our ways? Another spits. They'll ban dumplings next, someone mutters, and everyone chuckles. You feel the tension shift, just slightly. The law is new, but tradition has deeper roots than royal ink. Historians still argue how effective the Qing ban really was. On paper, it looked bold, but in reality, enforcement was patchy. In urban centers, there were foot patrols, yes, really, who inspected girls' feet at school entrances. But in villages, enforcement meant little. Binding simply went underground. In fact, some Han families bound their daughters' feet specifically to show resistance to the Manchu regime. It became a political statement, a quiet rebellion curled inside a shoe. And so, paradoxically, the ban breathed new life into the practice. Back in your home, your mother pulls the curtains shut. You sit beside her in the dark, watching as she begins unwrapping your feet, not to stop the binding, but to rewrap them tighter, narrower. The law says one thing, but the marriage market hasn't changed. Mothers know better than emperors. And you? You're caught between edicts and expectations. The cloth comes off. Your toes are stiff, swollen, and tinged slightly blue. The air stings them. Your mother massages them with sesame oil, then dips the cloth in warm water and begins again, tighter, because now it's not just about beauty, it's about loyalty. You hear your neighbor's voice through the wall, arguing with her sister about whether to stop the practice. The sister says yes. The neighbor says, "And have my daughter labeled a traitor?" You learn that even disobedience can be wrapped in gauze. A week later, a new edict arrives. Girls are invited to public unbinding ceremonies, where they can remove their bandages and show clean, natural feet as a sign of virtue and modern patriotism. You attend one. It's held in a tea house. There's music, a crowd, and a sense of cautious celebration. Girls untie their cloths, while women cheer. But you notice their feet beneath the tables, still arched, still stiff, still impossibly small. Unbound, maybe, but not undone. One brave girl walks barefoot across the floor. Her name is Fan. She grins at first, then stumbles, then gasps. Her foot buckles inward and she falls with a soft thump. The room goes quiet. Fan tries to stand. Her arches won't flatten. Her tendons won't stretch. She leans on a chair, eyes glassy with pain. "I haven't walked without binding in 5 years," she whispers. No one speaks, because they all understand. You can remove the cloth, but not the consequence. You meet her after the ceremony. She's soaking her feet in vinegar water behind the tea house. "It hurts more now than when I started," she says. You nod. There's a term some women use, ghost pain. It lingers even after the wrapping stops. Not just physical, emotional. The kind of ache that comes from giving up something you once believed was your ticket to a better life. That night, your mother doesn't speak as she rebinds your feet. She looks tired, as if every generation she carries is weighing down on her fingers. You want to ask her something, but what? Why didn't you stop? Did you ever want to? Do you still believe this makes me valuable? You don't ask. Instead, you look at her face, and you see a trace of shame she will never say aloud. Later, you pass a wedding shop. The new window display shows a girl in Western dress, high neckline, white lace. Her feet are bare, clean, whole. And for the first time, you notice a crack in the crowd's gaze. Some stare in disgust, but others with longing. A child asks her mother, "Can I wear those shoes someday?" The mother doesn't answer, but she doesn't say no. You follow the wind out of the city, past stone lanes and shrines, past the hum of silk merchants and paper lantern stalls, into a quieter place where the road narrows and the roofs flatten. The world grows simpler here. The air smells like river mud and wild garlic. You see oxen again, and children with no shoes at all. And then you see them, women, sitting in a half circle under a mulberry tree, spinning thread and shelling peanuts, laughing softly. Their feet are bare, not just unbound, never bound. You slow your step, as if you might spook them, these wild, unschooled women. You don't. They're not afraid of you. One pats the stone beside her. Sit, she says. You do. She offers you tea, thick, strong, steeped with leaves still clinging to twigs. It tastes like honesty. You look down at her feet. They are wide, strong, calloused like someone who has walked far and often. You can't help staring. First time seeing feet like mine? She grins. You nod. She takes a sip and shrugs. We didn't bind, never did. You blink. But why not? She waves her hand toward the hills. Too much walking here. We have to fetch water, gather herbs, chase goats. Bound feet are for women with idle lives and rich mothers. You glance around. The village is modest. Rough walls, thatched roofs, worn pathways. No matchmakers in sight. No embroidered slippers. No shame. Just dust, work, and freedom. You notice one woman with twin braids snorting at your astonishment. You think we're rare? She asks. Plenty of places like this. You Han folks just never came looking. Historians still argue how many women truly rejected foot binding in their time, and whether it was a personal act of rebellion or merely dictated by class and geography. Some say rural areas had higher rates of resistance, while others claim small feet were prized everywhere, just harder to maintain in the countryside. But in this village, no one cares about that. They care about useful feet. A girl runs past, barefoot, carrying a chicken under one arm. She's laughing, really laughing, that wild, breathless kind of joy that comes when you move without pain. You feel something stir in you, a memory of how your own feet used to be. Before the cloth, before the ritual. The woman beside you says, "My mother told me once, your body isn't clay to be reshaped. It's a tool, a gift. You either use it or you waste it." You nod, slowly. You don't fully believe it yet, but you want to. Later, in the village hall, they show you a different kind of shoe, flat-bottomed, straw-soled, tied with strips of hemp, practical, ugly, beautiful. A woman sets them beside a pair of Lotus shoes someone once gave her as a wedding gift. "I kept them to remind myself," she says. "Of what I didn't have to endure." You ask, "Were you ever tempted?" She shakes her head. Tempted by what? Pretty pain? Then she pauses. Well, maybe once. There was a boy. His mother thought I was crude, said I stomped like a buffalo, but he married me anyway. She laughs, touches her hair. I stomped down the aisle. Twice, actually. We renewed our vows last spring. You smile. She reaches under a loose board and pulls out something wrapped in cloth. We have a story here, about a woman who unbound her feet and walked to the ocean. She died there, you ask? No. She built a boat. You stay the night. They let you rest in a room where the window is always open and the floor is cool on bare skin. You stretch out your legs. Your feet feel strange, like they don't belong to you anymore. You dream of that boat, and in the morning, you walk barefoot through the dew. It stings. It heals. And then you wrap your feet again, not because you want to, but because you're not free yet. Still, something has changed. You've seen another way, and now the bindings feel tighter than ever. You're back in the city now, but something in your step has shifted. Maybe it's the memory of soft earth under your bare feet, or the echo of the village women's laughter, unbound and full of breath. But whatever it is, you notice the difference. You walk more carefully, not out of elegance, but caution, because now every step feels like a small betrayal. You're crossing into the stranger part of the story, the part where admiration and desire twist themselves around pain like ivy vines around a broken wall. Because while foot binding was marketed as virtue, modesty, and refinement, it was also something else, something darker. It was erotic. You're walking through a street of poetry shops now. Ink-stained scrolls hang from the rafters, and glassy-eyed scholars sip chrysanthemum wine, pretending not to notice the hand-painted fans featuring women with impossibly tiny shoes. One man lifts a fan to his nose, inhales, and sighs. Ah, the scent of a lotus step. You want to gag. Instead, you wander into a quieter stall, where the air smells like sandalwood and dust. A silk scroll hangs near the entrance, its calligraphy delicate and too familiar. Her foot, a curled petal, her gait, a song unwritten. To touch it is to touch grace and fire. It's a poem from the late Ming period. Scholars and merchants alike passed it around like candy, reciting it at banquets. You hear it whispered behind fans, murmured over bowls of rice wine. And so you understand something. And so these women weren't just walking ornaments. They were fantasies, walking, limping, bleeding fantasies. Historians still debate just how pervasive foot fetishes were in imperial China. Some argue that the fixation on bound feet was exaggerated by outsiders, missionaries, travelers, scandal-hungry journalists. Others say no. It was very real, very common, and deeply embedded in the culture's aesthetic. In certain poems, the bound foot becomes a symbol of mystery. It is hidden, forbidden, sacred. Husbands might not even see their wives' unwrapped feet. A girl's naked foot was more private than her face, more intimate than her hands. And that secrecy? It fueled obsession. You pass a man selling shoes from a wooden cart. He holds one up, red silk, curved sole, tiny enough to fit in your palm. For your wife, he says, grinning. Smaller is sweeter. You don't reply. Instead, you follow a side alley. It's darker here, quieter. You hear voices, low, laughing, a hidden tea house. You peer inside and see men gathered around a performer. She wears a veil. Her sleeves flutter like butterfly wings, but all eyes are fixed on her feet. They're bound. Yes, but exposed. She balances on one, raises the other, shows the arch, the curve, the exact line of pain. No one speaks. You realize this is a performance, not of music or song, but of endurance, of distortion, a living spectacle of delicate suffering. She bows. The men applaud. You slip away. Later, you find an old book hidden behind some spice jars in a merchant's home. The pages are yellowed, the ink faded, but the images are still sharp. Drawings of shoes, of bandages, of toes curled under and arches pushed high. But the captions? Petal of desire, treasure wrapped in silk. You shiver. It wasn't just about shrinking women. It was about making them manageable, eroticized fragility, desire draped in obedience. You meet a woman named Suyin later that day. She's older, dressed in widow's gray. Her eyes are tired, but clear. She sees you staring at her shoes. Want to ask me if it was worth it? She says. You nod. She chuckles dryly. My husband loved them. Never saw my bare foot once. Said the mystery made it better. Did you love him? You ask. She shrugs. He paid for our son's tutors. He gave me a silver hairpin once. I never bled during winter. So... Suppose that counts as kindness. She taps her shoe against the floor, slowly. But no, I didn't love him. I loved my mirror, the one that told me I was beautiful, because I suffered well. You sit with her for a while. She lets you touch the silk of her shoe. It's soft, worn smooth at the heel. I used to dream about running, she says. Never dreamed about dancing. Just running. Fast. Away. You almost cry. But instead, you say thank you. Because women like her, women who lived inside the system, played the part, and survived, don't ask for pity. They ask to be seen. That night, as you rewrap your own feet, you move slower. Not because you want to perfect the shape, but because you're starting to count the cost. And beauty is suddenly looking very expensive. It's raining tonight, not a heavy storm, just a soft, steady drizzle, the kind that makes rooftops glisten and paper umbrellas bloom like mushrooms in the street. You walk beneath the eaves, your bound feet making slow, careful steps. You've gotten good at the rhythm now. 1, 2. Pause. 1, 2. Sway. But tonight, the pain is different. It isn't sharp. It's dull, sullen, soaked deep into the bones. Your ankles throb. Your soles feel as if they're filled with gravel. Your bandages are damp, and every stitch of cloth presses tighter with the cold. You duck into a pavilion and sit, your legs stretched out just enough to keep your shoes dry. Someone else is there, a girl, younger than you, maybe 10. Her feet are freshly bound. You can tell by the stiffness in her jaw and the way her hands keep clenching. She doesn't cry, but her shoes are already blood-stained at the tips. You hand her your fan. She takes it without a word and fans her face. Then she whispers, "Will it stop hurting?" You pause. What do you say? You've heard every answer before. Yes, it will fade. You'll get used to it. Pain is the price of beauty. Pain is love. Pain is what separates girls from women. You don't want to lie? Not to her. So, instead, you say, sometimes. She nods, and you both sit in silence, listening to the rain tap softly on the tiles. There's a story someone once told you about a noblewoman during the Ming Dynasty. She wore 10 pairs of socks in winter because her feet were so damaged. Even silk felt like knives. But she smiled through every banquet, every poetry recital. A woman should not limp, she once wrote in her journal. Even if her feet have rotted beneath her, you still think about that sometimes, because you know what's underneath the poetry, under the silk, ulcers, blisters, broken skin, infections so deep the bone blackens, toenails that fall off one by one, and still, the bandages go on. Because you can't let the foot expand. If the arch collapses, even a little, the years of work, of pain, are undone. You watch the little girl readjust her foot beneath her robe. She winces, but doesn't cry. She is learning the same lesson you did. Grief must be silent, especially when it's daily. Historians estimate that 10–15% of girls died from complications during the foot binding process: gangrene, sepsis, crushed bones, slicing skin from the inside. But these weren't counted as tragedies. They were called accidents, exceptions, bad luck. You wonder how many mothers cried privately over their daughters' bodies, then bound the next child anyway. In wealthier homes, they had servant girls, who were often sent to be bound too, not because they needed husbands, but because beautiful servants elevated the mistress's prestige. They weren't family. They weren't loved. Their pain was ornamental. You once saw a servant girl fall down the stairs because her feet couldn't hold her weight. Her mistress scolded her for embarrassing the household. She was replaced 2 days later. That's the thing about suffering in silk. It doesn't stain the fabric the way you expect. You're sitting there, thinking of all this, when a doctor walks past the pavilion. He's elderly, hands stained with ink and herbs. He's known for his balms and bandage creams, for his willingness to tend to women's feet in secret. He nods at you, then at the girl. "She's early," he says. "She started last week." You reply. He sighs. "They always start too early now. Competition's fierce." He kneels beside her and gently touches the edge of her bandage. "Are you applying vinegar every night?" he asks. The girl nods. "Add crushed mint. It numbs the nerves." He straightens. "Won't stop the damage, but it'll help her sleep." You thank him. He walks away, umbrella high. You turn back to the girl, and she says, "I wanted blue shoes with dragons." You smile. "You'll make them." I don't know how to sew." "You'll learn?" She leans her head against the pavilion post. "Do you think my husband will like them?" You don't answer. Not because you don't know, but because the real answer is complicated. Some men never cared. Some were obsessed. Some married the feet before they married the girl. And some never looked once. They just accepted the binding as part of the package, like a dowry or a surname. You watch a pair of women pass by in the rain, each hobbling gently under her umbrella. One has a cane. The other walks with a permanent lean, but their shoes are flawless. Crimson silk, jade buttons, too perfect to suggest anything less than pride. You wonder if pain becomes invisible. Does it still count? That night, you sit at the edge of your sleeping mat, unwrapping your feet slowly. The cloth peels away like old skin. Beneath it, your soles are swollen. One toe is bleeding again. The smell is metallic and faintly sweet. You clean the wound. Dab it with herbs. Whisper a quiet prayer to no god in particular. Then you do what every girl before you has done. You wrap your feet again, because the world still asks for the shape, not the story. The world outside your window is changing. You hear it first, not in the chants of villagers or the echo of bells, but in the clang of foreign shoes on cobbled streets. Heavier steps, confident, unbound, Westerners. You see them walking, upright, fast, unaware of the art of swaying or the labor it takes to glide across a room with your feet folded like fortune cookies. They move without apology. Their women do, too. You hate how loud they sound, but you also watch them. One of them, a missionary woman with round spectacles and no makeup, stops outside a tea house. A girl spills a tray of cups, clearly struggling with her balance. The woman gasps. She bends down, not to scold, but to help. Then she sees the girl's shoes and winces. You see it. That mixture of horror and pity. The kind that makes you want to hide your feet behind a curtain, but you can't. They're already the first thing anyone notices. You shuffle away. That evening, a neighbor brings news. They're writing about us. Who? Your mother asks. The foreigners. In their newspapers. About the bindings. You don't know what a newspaper is. But soon, someone brings one in, translated sloppily into Chinese. The headline? China's women, crippled by cruel custom. Beneath it, a grainy photo of a girl with her foot unwrapped. Your stomach turns. Not because of the image, but because of the exposure. She looks like she's being punished or studied. And just like that, you're no longer a daughter or a bride. You're an object, a symbol, a spectacle. Missionaries, reformers, travelers from Britain and America begin flooding port cities, distributing pamphlets and giving speeches. Free your daughters, they plead. Let them walk like human beings. Some use religion to justify it. Others speak in the language of civilization, progress, even capitalism. You listen from the doorway as they speak to your father. She will never walk properly, one says, her accent thick. She is in pain. Surely. You see this? He answers politely. It is our tradition. Later, he turns to your mother. They don't understand. They never have. He's not wrong. Historians note that foreign reactions to foot binding ranged from genuine concern to performative outrage to voyeuristic fascination. Some missionaries built schools for unbound girls. Others simply collected photos of bound feet and wrote travelogues filled with thinly veiled disgust and thicker layers of titillation. You walk past a shop where a Western photographer is advertising a series of images, the hidden feet of the Orient, real photos. It makes your skin crawl, BLB, because these people don't want to understand the custom. They want to own the story. Even in disgust, they are consuming it. You return home and stare at your feet, and for the first time, you don't know who they belong to. Not to your mother, not to your husband, not to the culture, and certainly not to the photographers, but they don't feel like yours either. Not yet. You meet a teacher named Miss Jang at a reform school. She wears cloth shoes and no makeup. Her feet are whole. She walks quickly. She laughs loudly. She tells you, you know, there's a movement now. We're forming clubs, anti-foot binding societies. You raise an eyebrow. What do you do there? We write letters. We hold public unbindings. We tell girls they don't have to do this anymore. You glance at her feet. But you never had to. She nods. My mother wanted to bind me. My father refused. They fought about it for a year. And he won? No. She died from a fever before the process started. She says it so casually, like that was just a fork in the road of fate. You start attending the meetings. Quietly. At first. You sit at the back, your wrapped feet hidden beneath your robe. You listen to women who've unbound, women who never bound, women who regret doing it, women who don't. One says, I used to think my daughter would never find a husband unless I bound her, but now I want her to find herself. Another murmurs, I still think small feet are beautiful, but I won't hurt anyone to prove it. You start to cry. No one stops you. Afterward, a woman gives you a pair of soft cloth slippers. You don't have to wear them now, she says. Just keep them. You take them home. You hide them beneath your pillow. But every night, you unwrap your feet a little earlier, and every morning, you wait a little longer before rebinding. Something is changing. You can feel it in your arches. You've started walking barefoot in your room, not far, just a few tentative steps between the mat and the door, the door and the window. You keep the bandages nearby, just in case. But with each evening, the window opens wider, the air feels less foreign, and your own skin less shameful. Your mother notices. She doesn't say anything the first time, or the second, but one morning, she picks up your discarded bandage from the floor, folds it slowly, and places it back in your box of silk threads. "I know what you're doing," she says, without looking up. You freeze. "It's your decision now," she adds. "That's all. No permission, no blessing, just an acknowledgement that the power has shifted, however slightly. You sit with that for a long time, and then you go to your first unbinding ceremony. It's not grand, not a parade, just a quiet gathering in a small courtyard tucked behind a new school building. Girls sit in a circle, their shoes in a pile at the center like an altar to what they're giving up. A teacher, Miss Jang, reads aloud from a letter by a provincial governor who has outlawed binding in his territory. "For the health of our daughters," she reads, "and the dignity of our future." Some of the girls nod, some cry, some, like you, just stare at their feet. They look strange now, unwrapped. They are swollen, pale in odd places, bruised in others. They do not resemble feet in paintings or poems. They are no longer lotuses. They are flesh, wounded, real, awkward. One girl tries to walk. Her foot bends sideways, involuntarily. The crowd gasps. She laughs. "I suppose I'll invent a new style," she says. You laugh too. Historians still debate how effective these anti-foot binding campaigns were. Some say the tide shifted only after the Republic of China formed in 1912 and made the ban official. Others believe the real change came earlier, from grassroots efforts, women's groups, and modern schooling. Either way, something irreversible began in the early 20th century. You feel it in your bones. Literally. Your arches scream at you every morning. Your toes, half fused from years of pressure, try to remember what spreading feels like. They twitch at night. You get cramps so deep they wake you up gasping. And yet, you keep going. You visit a cobbler who started designing wider shoes for unbound girls. He shows you a pair made from soft cotton and stitched with clouds. "I'm calling them sky shoes," he says. "Not very elegant, but they let you breathe." You buy them. You wear them. At first, just indoors. Then to the market. Then on a walk past the river. You notice people looking at your feet. Some sneer. Some whisper. One old woman mutters, "She'll never marry like that." You keep walking, because now you can, later, you read a pamphlet translated from English. It shows drawings of bones, real bones, foot bones, before and after binding. You finally see the truth on paper. The metatarsals pushed inward, the toes bent underneath, the arch unnaturally high. It's not poetry. It's pathology. You show it to your mother. She stares at the image, then folds the paper in half and says, "We did what we thought was best." You want to yell, to ask, best for whom, but you stop, because even now, even with her tired hands and her haunted eyes, she's trying. She's unlearning. And so are you. You start writing. Just a little. A diary. A letter. Notes from your meetings. Thoughts you were never allowed to say out loud. You write about the girl with the dragon shoes, about the servant who fell, about Shu and May and the woman who built the boat. You write, we were not weak, we were small. There's a difference. One day, Miss Zhang hands you a printed flyer. It says, we seek testimonies, women who have unbound, women who refused, women who remember. You sign your name. It's the first time you feel like it belongs to you, because before now, your story was always someone else's to tell. Your mother's, your husband's, your matchmaker's. Your feet told that story for you, curled and quiet. Now, they're telling a new one. It's not graceful. It limps. It stumbles. It trips on cobblestones and flinches at every step. But it moves. Forward. And that's enough. The banners have changed. Where once they read poetry about moonlit steps and lotus blooms, now they proclaim things like, strong women build strong nations, unbind for the future, healthy feet, healthy country. It's the early days of the Republic now, 1912. The Qing dynasty has fallen. The emperor is a child who's been told he can no longer rule. Everything feels wobbly, unstable, as if the ground itself hasn't decided what shape to take. You're still in the city, still walking slowly, still breaking in your new sky shoes. But now you're not alone. There are girls beside you. Dozens, hundreds, some limping, some freshly unbound, some dragging feet that never bound at all. At school assemblies, you recite the new pledges. I will not bind my daughter's feet. I will learn. I will walk. I will speak. It feels good, almost too good, because in the corners, behind closed doors, beneath the sleeves of older women, you still see the bandages. Quiet resistance. Old habits don't die just because a president says so. You visit a cousin in a smaller town, a few days' journey away. Her name is Gia. She greets you with a smile and a hobble. Her feet are still bound. I thought you unwrapped, you ask. She shrugs. I did, but it hurt too much. I can't sleep otherwise. Her bandages are soft and yellowed. She says she only wears them at night, but you see her adjusting them after lunch, tugging gently at the edge. I don't want to be left behind, she admits. But left behind what? The market, she says. Marriage, gossip, myself. Historians often point out that even after foot binding was officially banned, the custom didn't vanish. It lingered. In rural areas especially, it lasted well into the 1930s and even 40s. In secret, in shame, in fear of social exile, some girls rebound themselves after unbinding, unable to walk, work, or simply bear the sight of their altered feet. You ask Gia if she remembers her first binding. She nods. I bled for 3 nights. My mother cried, but she kept rapping. And now? She looks out the window. I suppose I cry, and still rap. You sit with her, passing her a balm you've brought, mint and angelica. She applies it to her heels with practiced tenderness. Will you ever stop? You ask. Maybe, when I'm old, or when no one cares anymore. That last part stings, because it's true. The moment the fashion fades, so does the care. Back in the city, you see posters advertising a different kind of beauty, Western dresses, unbound shoes, flat heels, girls playing tennis, bicycling, laughing. A new kind of woman is being born, but she's not you, not yet. You're in between, too bound to run, too unwrapped to belong. You start helping at the Unbinding Society, sorting letters, welcoming girls, showing them how to walk again. You measure their feet. You teach them to stretch their arches against flat stones. You soak herbs in large ceramic bowls and gently peel away bandages that haven't been touched in years. Some cry, some scream, some do neither. They just stare into the water as their past unravels in milky ribbons. You begin to understand that unbinding is not just physical, it is emotional, cultural, spiritual. You meet a woman named a guy who tells you, I kept my feet wrapped even after my husband died. I didn't want the ghosts to see me. Ghosts? She nods. Of all the girls who didn't make it, of all the toes buried in secret, you want to laugh, but you don't, because sometimes, when you unwrap your own feet in the dark, you feel them too. Not ghosts exactly, just memory, coiled in your arches, resting in the gap where your little toe used to press. You walk home past a row of old shops. One is boarded up, another now sells bicycles. Another, your favorite tea shop, has begun offering reading classes for girls. The streets smell like rain and progress. And something else, loss. You think about your mother. She still binds her feet. Not tightly anymore, just enough to keep them shaped. She no longer scolds you for going barefoot, but she doesn't quite look you in the eyes, either. You wonder if she's ashamed or afraid. You wonder if she still thinks of your daughter, who hasn't been born yet, and whether her feet will be shaped by cloth or by freedom. And in that moment, you realize you get to decide. Not because the president said so, not because the banners said so, but because you said so. And that power, it doesn't limp. It stands. You're sitting in the back of a lecture hall now. The room smells like dust and ink, with streaks of morning light sliding across the chalkboard. It's not a grand space, just a converted tea house with bamboo walls and paper lanterns still hanging in corners. But what's happening here feels enormous. A man is showing photographs. They click into place on the screen, one by one, black and white, faded around the edges, each one a portrait, bound feet, shoes next to rulers, arch close-ups, faces of girls looking down, never at the camera. This is what we inherited, he says, and what we must document. You squirm in your seat, because you're not just looking at images, you're looking at yourself. The first photo shows a girl's unwrapped foot, bones visible under thin skin, toes curled under, permanently stiff. The room is silent. Then the next, a young woman walking in a courtyard, one hand held out to steady herself, the other tucked modestly into her sleeve. Her shoes are embroidered with phoenixes, but her face, blank. Historians still argue about these images. Were they documentation, exploitation, empowerment? In the early 20th century, missionaries and reformers began taking photographs of bound feet to raise awareness. Some did it out of genuine concern, others to provoke outrage, a few, disturbingly, for curiosity. A photo can preserve pain, but it can also flatten it, strip it of voice, context, complexity. You feel that now. The lecturer speaks again. We're compiling these images for the National Archive, for the museum, for remembrance. You wonder, who asked to be remembered like this? After the talk, you wander through the adjoining gallery. It's dim, cool. Shoeboxes and faded robes lie behind glass. Quotes etched on the walls. My mother told me beauty was sacrifice. We walked not because we could, but because we must. I hated my shoes, but I loved how people looked at me. One display case holds a pair of red Lotus shoes, pristine, Beside them, the bandage, still stained, still smelling faintly of old herbs and sweat. Your stomach tightens, because the longer you stare, the more you realize these shoes are still performing, still whispering their silent story to anyone who'll stop and gawk. You don't want to gawk anymore. You want to listen. You sit on a bench across from the display. A woman joins you. She's old. Pale blue robe, hair like silver thread, feet unwrapped. You used to bind? You ask gently. She nods. Do you remember your first shoes? She smiles. They were green, with plum blossoms. My grandmother made them. Did you like them? She chuckles softly. I liked how proud they made my mother. That was enough. You ask her if she minds being displayed like this. She looks at the glass case. Better to be seen than forgotten, she says. Even if it's painful? Especially then. You walk home under a gray sky, the first hints of rain trembling on the breeze. On the wall near the museum is a painted mural, a girl holding a pair of shoes in one hand, walking barefoot across a field of ink-brushed grass. Her feet are imperfect. Her stride is uneven, but she's moving. That night, you pull out a box from under your bed. Inside, your last pair of bound shoes, red silk, embroidered in gold thread, the toes curved upward like a smile trying too hard. You run your fingers over them. You remember everything. The first step, the first blister, the first time someone called you beautiful. You wrap them gently in cloth, and you don't put them back under the bed. You place them by the window. So in the morning, when the light creeps through the paper screen, it will fall on them. Not to glorify them, but to remind you that you walked away, and you kept walking. You're sitting across from her now. She's in her 90s, maybe older, skin like folded parchment, hands trembling, but still precise. Her name is Zhou Lanying, and she is, so they tell you, one of the last living women to have her feet bound before the practice disappeared completely. She wears a dark jacket buttoned to the throat, and a skirt that just barely shows the curved tip of her shoe. Even in her final years, she is formal, poised, as if she still lives inside a world that expects her to move quietly. You ask, gently, "May I see them?" Her lips purse, not in disapproval, but memory. Then, slowly, she nods. Her caretaker kneels to help. The cloth comes off first, carefully unwound. It takes minutes, strip after strip, each one yellowed with time, but clean. Then the shoe. You're not ready. It's like seeing a painting peeled from its frame, or a shell removed from a delicate animal. The foot is impossibly small, misshapen, the arch so high it barely touches the floor. The toes, if they can still be called that, are curled completely under, fused by decades of compression and bone reshaping. The heel sticks out proudly, as if trying to escape the rest of the foot. It doesn't look human. It looks like something made. You catch your breath. She sees it, and smiles. They're ugly now, she says, voice as dry as winter leaves. But once, they were famous. Famous, you ask? In our town. They said I had the best Lotus in the county. I wore phoenix shoes to my wedding. She leans back, hands folded in her lap. Every girl envied me. Every matchmaker wanted me. And she pauses, looking out the window. I believed them. I thought I was lucky. Were you? She doesn't answer immediately. I lived in a good house, she says. I had sons, a garden, a full rice jar. That's what lucky meant. You study her face, the memory, still sharp, the pride, still present, and underneath it, a shadow. Do they still hurt? You ask. She nods. They always hurt, she says. Even now, I feel them every morning before I move. It's like a bell that rings in my bones. You sit with her for a while, saying nothing. The room is warm. A pot of chrysanthemum tea steams gently beside the bed. A cat sleeps on the windowsill. In this quiet space, her pain seems softer, not gone, never gone, but folded neatly into the rhythm of her life. She shows you her old shoes, tiny, faded red, embroidered with swallows and spring flowers. The soles are worn smooth from decades of cautious steps. I made these after my second son was born, she says. I stitched his name inside. She hands you one. It weighs almost nothing, but you hold it with both hands. Later, you help rewrap her feet. She winces, but doesn't complain. You don't have to wear them anymore. You whisper. She chuckles. I know, but I don't like the cold. You think of all the girls you've met along this journey, the ones who still carried their shoes in drawers and boxes, the ones who threw them into rivers, the ones who passed them on, stitched them into stories, or wore them like armor. Zhou Lanying leans back into her cushion. People want me to say I regret it, she murmurs. That it was wrong. That I would change it if I could. And would you? She closes her eyes. I don't know, she says. I only know that it's mine. You write that down, not because it makes sense, but because it doesn't. Because that's what real memory is. Messy, unresolved, tangled with pride and shame. You thank her. She lifts a hand in farewell. You walk out into the fading sun, your own feet still stiff from hours of sitting, but blessedly unbound. You stretch your toes in your soft cloth shoes. They ache in the arches, not from binding, but from empathy. And you realize your body remembers things it never lived. The echo of her pain now lives somewhere in you, and you'll carry it carefully. It's been months now since you last wore your old shoes. They still sit in a box at the back of your closet, wrapped in faded silk. You haven't thrown them away. You're not sure why. Maybe you're not quite ready. Maybe you never will be. But your feet? Your feet are different now. Not pretty. Never that again. They're too crooked. Too warped. Your toes don't straighten. Your arches still feel like they're being pulled by invisible strings. But you can move. You can stand. And most days, you can walk without thinking about every single step. Most days. Today, though, the pain is back. Not sharp. Not even from exertion. It's just there, deep in the bones. A dull throb behind your toes, like a ghost tapping from the inside. You sit down, pull off your shoes, and rub the soles of your feet. The skin is soft. The shape is still strange. You whisper, I'm not wearing those again. But your feet already know that. What they don't know is how to forget. There's a term your teacher used last week, body memory. The way the body holds on to habits, rhythms, reflexes, even after healing begins, even after the injury's gone. You think of the girl you were at 6, holding your breath as the first cloth wrap tightened. The way your toes curled inward, not from design, but fear. How your mother's hands trembled even as she bound you. Your body remembers that. You lie on the floor and stretch your legs. Your ankles crack. Your arches spasm. You press your heels against the cool stone tiles and exhale slowly. There's a scholar who says that foot binding wasn't just physical, it was emotional architecture, that it shaped how girls stood, sat, spoke, thought, that it folded not just the body, but the personality. Historians still debate that, but you don't. You know exactly how binding rewires the mind. You walk differently now, not just with your feet, but with your thoughts. You question things that used to feel like truth. You no longer believe that pain is the same as virtue, but some days, when your foot catches on a step, or when your shoes feel just a bit too wide, something inside whispers, you were more graceful before, and it hurts, because part of you misses it. The applause, the praise, the way your family beamed when someone admired your tiny steps, the way people said, "She walks like silk drifting over water." You were a poem once, now you're prose. You tell yourself that's better. You believe it, mostly. But grief doesn't always come from loss. Sometimes it comes from leaving. You meet another unbound woman in the market. Her name is Dan Dan. She's around your age, maybe younger. Her feet were released only last year, where she walks with a slight limp. One leg is shorter now, the result of years of uneven pressure. She jokes, "I tell people it's a war injury." You laugh, not because it's funny, but because it's true. You walk together sometimes now, just short trips, past the riverbank, through the plum orchards. She teaches you how to climb a slope without crying. You teach her how to stretch her arches before bed. Together, you form new habits. They say it takes 21 days to make one. You're on day 268, still counting. You and Dan Dan visit a temple where the statues are ancient and the incense burns thick and low. People used to come here to pray for good matches, for soft feet, for obedient daughters. Now, the prayer ribbons are different. One reads, "May my daughter walk where I could not." You tie your own. It reads, "Let me forget how to tiptoe." You leave it fluttering in the breeze. That night, you dream of the village again, the barefoot girls, and the dragon shoes. The woman who said her feet helped her survive, but not to live. You wake with your feet cramping, but this time, you don't reach for the bandages. You just breathe. You're in a museum now, not the quiet kind with polished marble floors and velvet ropes. This one is a little dusty, tucked into the side of a cultural hall, with mismatched display cases and handwritten labels. It smells like wood polish and old paper. Someone has lit incense in a corner. You came here alone, but you are not alone, because they're all here. The shoes, the needles, the bandages, the soaked herbs in blue and white porcelain jars, tiny sewing kits, photographs, frayed and faded, a pair of feet, cast in plaster, curled, deformed, preserved. You press your forehead to the glass. The shoes are smaller than you remember. One pair is embroidered with chrysanthemums, the stitches unraveling slightly at the edges. Another has soles made from thin layers of paper, lacquered and pressed flat. There's even a child's pair, too small for anything but memory. You recognize the style, Southern, mid-Qing, likely from a merchant's daughter. You whisper to no one, "I wore those once." Not exactly, but close enough. You move through the exhibits like a ghost retracing your own echo. At the far end, there's a panel of contemporary art, a collage of torn bandages shaped like birds, mid-flight. The artist wrote, "For the grandmothers who limped so we could run." You sit down on the wooden bench facing it, and you cry, quietly, because what else can you do? You feel it all, grief, gratitude, guilt, and something heavier, The weight of being the last to wear them, the last to unbind, the last to explain it when children point and ask, "Why would anyone do that?" You've seen that look before, in younger women's eyes, disgust, confusion, pity, and sometimes shame, the kind passed down through blood, but you've also seen curiosity, and that's more dangerous, because forgetting is quiet. It creeps in like mold, softening the edges of what used to be sharp, sharp like the smell of old wounds, sharp like shoes too small for memory. Historians still argue whether foot binding was a collective cruelty or a collective survival, whether it was enforced by men or perpetuated by women, whether it was madness or strategy, revered or reviled. You've stopped arguing because you felt the answer. It wasn't one thing, it was everything. A girl's first binding was an act of love, twisted, misguided, but love. A mother's hands shook because she remembered how hers had shaken, because she couldn't stop the cycle, but she could do it gently. You walk to the guest book near the exit and open to the last page. You see names, notes, small apologies scribbled in careful characters. To my grandmother, I'm sorry I asked you to unwrap them just to prove it. To my future daughter, I promise your steps will be your own. To the shoes, thank you, and goodbye. You add your own. You write, I wore them. I survived them. I do not forget. You cap the pen and leave. Outside, the air is warm and filled with street sounds, bicycle bells, old men laughing, the sizzle of something frying in sesame oil. You pause at a street vendor's stall. A young girl runs by, barefoot, laughing, arms out like wings. No one scolds her. You smile. In a shop window across the street, you see a new pair of shoes on display. Sturdy, soft, a little plain, wide soles, no embroidery, no pretense. You go inside. The clerk greets you kindly. These are new, she says. Imported rubber. Good for long walks. You nod. I'm learning how. You say. She doesn't ask what you mean, but she sees it in your eyes. She brings out your size. It fits. Not perfectly. Your feet will never quite flatten. Never forget, but well enough. Well enough to move forward. Well enough to leave the museum behind. Well enough to make sure you never return because you have to. Only because you choose to. You're home now, not the house you grew up in, not the courtyard where your mother wrapped your feet, not the silk-scented marriage chamber where you once sat waiting to be called beautiful. This home is smaller, simpler, yours. The windows are open. The floor is bare. Your shoes sit by the door, soft cloth, wide-toed, worn at the heels. You step out of them without thinking, and for once, your feet touch the earth with no apology. You look down. They are not elegant, not by any storybook standard, not by the poetry that used to say the ideal woman drifted through the world on clouds of crushed bone and embroidered silk. No, these feet are real, misshapen, scarred, alive. You take a step. It is not graceful. It is not silent, but it is yours. You think back to all the names you heard along the way. Shu, May, Fan, Jia, Dan Dan, Miss Jang, the girl with the dragon shoes, the widow who still wrapped in winter, Zhou Lan Ying, with her tiny steps and enormous memory. You remember their stories, not as footnotes, but as footprints, each one leading to the next, each one carrying you here. You once thought the bindings would define you forever, but they didn't. You once thought that being unbound would mean being free. And it did. But also, It didn't. Because freedom isn't just untying a bandage. It's deciding what you do after. You sit down at your small writing table. You open a notebook. The paper smells faintly of bamboo pulp. You pick up your pen and write, "I was born with 2 feet. I gave them away. I got them back. This is the story of what I kept." You don't know who you're writing it for. Your daughter? Your granddaughter? A girl you haven't met yet, who will one day ask, "Why did they do this to you?" And you'll say, "It started with love and ended with choice." You place your pen down. Outside, the sun is setting, not dramatically, just gently. The sky has that bruised lavender tint, the kind that makes everything soft. You sit quietly and let it pass over you, and somewhere inside your arches, those aching, stubborn, loyal arches, you feel it. Not pain, not pride, something quieter, closure. So now, let's ease out of this story, slowly. Let the shoes fade first, the tiny ones, red or blue, stitched with birds and blossoms. See them placed back into their boxes, lined with cloth, folded with the care of memories too fragile to discard. Let the bandages unwind next, layer by layer, until the air touches skin again. Let the ache soften, not vanish, just soften into something familiar, no longer sharp. Let the voices quiet, the matchmakers, the mothers, the poets, the whisperers behind fans. Let them all trail off, like echoes disappearing down a hallway you've just walked. Take a deep breath. You're back in your own room now. No stone floors, no gauze-wrapped toes. Just you, your own feet, your own choices. Curl your toes a little. Stretch your legs beneath the blanket. Feel the difference between memory and presence. And if your heart still holds the weight of the girls you met tonight, that's okay. Their stories don't ask to be forgotten. They just ask to be carried gently. You can let your breathing slow now. There's no need to walk any further. Not tonight. The floor is cool. The air is still. The fan hums in the background, soft and steady. The shoes are in the museum now. The bandages are tucked away. The pain has been named. And the path walked. And you are free to sleep. Sweet dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.